Sarah had always dreamed of living in a quiet, peaceful town. So when she found the old house on the outskirts of town, she thought it would be the perfect place to start a new chapter in her life. The house was cheap, too, almost too cheap, but Sarah didn't mind. The creaky floorboards, the dimly lit rooms, and the crumbling wallpaper only added to its charm, or so she thought. The first night, Sarah heard a sound, something faint and distant, like the scratching of nails on wood. She chalked it up to the house settling, but the sound grew louder each night. She would lie awake, heart pounding, staring at the cracked walls, unable to pinpoint the source. One evening, after the scratching grew unbearable, Sarah decided to investigate. She stood in the middle of the living room, listening carefully. The sound was coming from the walls, faint but unmistakable. Suddenly, the wall near her began to shudder. At first, it was subtle, but then it began to pulse, as though something inside the walls was alive. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the walls creaked and groaned. Then, something horrifying happened, the eyes. Eyes began to appear on the wall. At first, they were small, like cracks in the plaster, but then they widened, revealing pupils, real, watching pupils, staring at Sarah. Her heart raced, and she stumbled backward, eyes locked onto the grotesque sight. But as she stepped away, the eyes followed her. They blinked. They moved. The house wasn't just alive, it was aware of her. Terrified, Sarah rushed out of the room, but the eyes were everywhere now. They were on the walls, on the ceiling, peering from behind furniture, staring at her from every angle. No matter where she went, the eyes watched, unmoving but omnipresent. Sarah tried to escape the house, but every time she reached the front door, it would slam shut before she could open it. The windows, once clear, were now covered in thick, sticky black goo. The walls groaned and shifted, pushing her back toward the center of the house, where the eyes grew more intense. The next day, Sarah found an old journal hidden in the attic. It belonged to the house's previous owner, a man who had gone mad after living in the house for years. The journal was filled with ramblings about the whispering eyes that lived in the walls, watching every moment, waiting for someone to make the mistake of staying too long. The journal spoke of the house's curse. The eyes weren't just watching, they were feeding off the fear of the people inside. The more terrified a person became, the stronger the eyes grew, until they could control the victim's mind and body. The final entry read, "They have taken me. I am not alone. I am now one of them." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The previous owner had gone insane because of the eyes, and now, they were starting to get to her, too. That night, the whispers began. They were soft at first, like a distant murmur, but then they grew louder, more urgent. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the eyes stared harder, closer, their gaze becoming suffocating. Sarah. The voice wasn't just in her head, it was coming from the walls. It whispered her name over and over, growing more familiar, like the sound of someone she loved. Her mother's voice. "Sarah, it's time to join us." In a panic, Sarah tried to claw her way out of the house, her hands bleeding from scraping against the walls. But the eyes were everywhere now, on her skin, in her mind, controlling her. Her heart raced as she felt herself slipping away, her body no longer her own. In the final moments of her consciousness, she heard the voice again, this time as though it was speaking directly into her soul. watched you for so long.